Hey fellow growers, in this series we're going to go over what we call Mike's Automated Garden for Busy People. So we built this tent setup specifically for the person who has a hard time tending to their garden every day. Whether you like to take weekend trips, travel for work, are a caretaker, or anything else that absorbs your time, this system will allow you to grow plants while only having to open and check your grow space once a week. So we're using a Wi-Fi based controller that syncs your entire grow room's data to your phone, so you can see how your plants are doing from the beach, the office, or even your in-laws, if you wanted to show it off, of course. So I'm excited to show you all our setup, and without much further ado, let's get into it.
Hey guys, welcome to the Research and Development Grove. So today we're going to be setting up an autopot system, and we're going to show you just how easy it is to set up a small tent with an autopot system and grow your own vegetables at home hydroponically. So with an autopot system, the big thing that we have to think about is how you're getting that water to the plant. You have two main things. You have your reservoir and you got your trays with aqua valves. We're going to go over the aqua valves here in a second, but one big thing about the reservoir. So autopot recommends that the reservoir is raised off of the ground about 6 inches for the best head pressure. What you can do is grab one of these nice cheap racks from any hardware store or online, and you just take one level of shelving off. You just take a grinder and you cut that one level of shelving off on the top, and it creates this brace. That way you can give your autopot reservoir that 6-inch rise. You have a little bit of space here for maybe some fans or some nutrients if you want to store them in your tent. And this is nice and up off the ground. You have that good head pressure coming down, and there's no likelihood of this tipping over and spilling all over into your grow. So let's go ahead and throw this into the tent right now. So in this tent, we have our water coming down, just this 1/2-inch line. So we're gonna put our reservoir on the right side here. We'll see if we can just slide this through the top here. So one thing we can do with this 1/2-inch water line coming down, we could definitely shorten it, or we could just rest it on top of the autopot res. When we want to fill, we can just put our 1/2-inch outlet here into our autopot lid. And so when we want to water, we can just go ahead and get our 1/2-inch tubing valve here, throw it in our autopot lid and turn on the water. You could lift up the lid to kind of see the water levels. Or later what we'll do, since we have room on the sides of this rack, is we can actually run a 1/4-inch line into the side of this and put a float valve in here. And so these 1/2-inch valves are pretty useful, and you don't necessarily need to put hose clamps on them, but I always like to double check my connections with hose clamps. The next thing we do now that we have the reservoir set is we're going to go ahead and get our autopot trays in with the aqua valves. All right guys, we're going to be talking about the autopot trays and the aqua valve 5s now. The aqua valves do this really cool thing that allow full dryback of your pots before they do another watering cycle. They don't sit in water, regardless of what a lot of people say. So let's go ahead and take one of these aqua valves apart, and I'll show you exactly how they work. So these aqua valves will sit in these nice trays on this little friction fitting right here on the trays that fits into this little hole here. Now this is the aqua valve 5. Obviously it's been used for a few cycles. You just need to clean these off, and the key thing is going to be these 2 silicone seals. So the first seal that you have is right here on the top float valve. The second silicone seal that you have, you can remove this float valve by just sliding it off there. The second float valve is underneath and on this bottom float, and that's going to be right here, and that actually closes off the main inlet of water, as you can see from this hose here. That's the main inlet of water that's going to flood into your aqua valve system. So what the aqua valve system does, once it's basically empty on water and this float is down, that's going to create a vacuum in the top chamber, which is going to be on the ground. If there's a water level here, that's going to bring this bottom float down. So as this bottom float sits down, either on a dry bed or on a tray that's dried out, then as this floats down below the level, not lifted up like that, then the water flows in while it's at that level. And as the water comes up, it increases, this float locks in, which locks off the flow of water, and this float opens up like that. And when this float is open, then that opens the vacuum pressure on the top of the aqua valve, so that as the water in the tray starts to come down, since this float drops down, it closes that vacuum and makes that vacuum transfer over to the leftover water underneath this float, bringing that float down as well, which again brings the water back into your trays and waters it through. So there's actually a dwell period between when there's no water at the bottom of your trays to when this little float valve inside has to come down. So you do get sufficient dry back, and then once it's fully dried back, then the float will drop and it'll refill all the pots. So that's a really cool system, requires absolutely no power, scalable, which is cool. You can have 4 pots like we have here, 8 pots, 32 pots. You just got to change your reservoir, change how you're running the lines. All right, so let's go ahead and connect our aqua valve now to the rest of the system. I have most of the system laid out already to how I want the pots, nice and evenly spaced. So to put the aqua valve system in, you find this little friction fit knob at the bottom of your trays. You line it up with this little notch on the aqua valve. Make sure the tube is snugly seated in this right here. Once that's snugly seated, you push this on the backside down, and you're gonna find that your aqua valve is set. Now, it's not gonna be completely flush, but that's good because we have this center channel here for that little bit of extra water to create that vacuum pressure for the inner load. So now this is done. What we're gonna do now is turn this, because this is actually gonna be set up this way. So this is gonna be our line going into our reservoir. So our reservoirs come with these nice shut-off valves from Autopot. We just go ahead and push connect them into our line here. And so the first tray that's gonna be watered is this one. And then it's gonna come down, it tees, and it goes to this four-way. And from this four-way, we're gonna have these two pots watered. That's this pot here and this pot here. And then the last pot that we're gonna water and have one extra thing for, gonna be right here. So that's our last fourth pot. And what I like to do at the end of our Autopot systems is run another shut-off valve, another small length of tubing there. And honestly, I just put like a paper clip at the end just for reassurance. Kind of paranoid. I like hose clamps and paper clips on all my stuff to make sure it doesn't leak while I'm out, especially on a system like this where you set it and forget it. This is also great if you want to drain your system, drain the lines. If you want to change out from, say, a vegetative formula to a fruiting formula or a flower formula, then you can flush your lines that way as well, which is really cool. All right, now that we have all of our trays and our tubing set connected to our reservoir, we're gonna go ahead and fill pots. There's certain ways you want to fill your pots for the Autopot system that is important on aeration and how that water actually gets up into the root zone. So we'll go over how to fill your Autopot system right now. All right, guys, so now we're gonna be filling our pots for the Autopot system. So one of the key things that you need to use when you're using any of these Autopot systems is either a layer of Hydroton or a layer of Perlite at the bottom. I like to use Perlite because you don't have to rinse it. There's not as much dust as Hydroton, but Hydroton you can wash and reuse because they're nice uniform pellets. So it's really up to you whether you want to reuse or have something that's quick and easy and just replant into the same pot without tilling it. So I'm gonna go ahead and start with adding about 2 inches into this pot here. Shake that in. Measure bottom of our finger, should be just about right there, 2 knuckles in. Now the first thing I'm gonna add after this is gonna be some of this Fox Farm Ocean Forest. This has a good amount of peat in it, good amount of forest product. I like to put it at the bottom as just 1 cup. 1 cup being one of these measuring cups, which is about a liter's worth of this soil on top of this, just to make sure that that heat is wicking that water up. And the particle size on this is nice and small, so they'll kind of seep in between a lot of that perlite and create a good kind of even transition between your perlite layer and your soil layer. So once that's in, give it a little bit of a shake to settle it in. And this is a mix that I've made with 3 parts Fox Farm, 2 parts Mother Earth Cocoa Perlite 70/30, and then 1 part of the number 3 Mother Earth Perlite. That's this mix here. This is the mix that we found here at the Test Grow works really well in these Autopot systems. I think these large aggregate chunks in the media help aerate it since it's kind of just sitting there, and you can do multiple grows in the same pot if you wanted to. This kind of allows you to not have to add vermicompost or till or do anything to this, so it doesn't compact down. So I'm gonna go ahead and add this about halfway. Now at the halfway point, one thing that I also always like to use with an Autopot system is a good microbe blend. So in this media, we don't really know what cultures are active. We don't know really what pathogenic cultures there might be. So the safest and best bet to do as far as nutrient uptake and competitive exclusion is to add a good microbe blend anytime you're transplanting or planting something in. We're gonna use the VPS commercial microbes because they have a really good blend of beneficial bacteria and some good beneficial fungi. The big thing for our vegetable plants is gonna be these beneficial bacteria. They're gonna make these nutrients available. And then hopefully, if they get inoculated by these fungi, then that's gonna help them take up water, take up nutrients as well. Typically, you can add this to your fertigation program, but what we're going to do today is we're just going to basically top dress over this and then fill over with soil. All right, so guys, usually when we add this to our medias, we'll fertigate it in because it's nice and easy because this melts down. But when we're just doing an Autopot system and the fertigation's literally coming from the ground up, we're just going to amend the soil itself before transplanting. The rate on this is extremely low, so you don't need too much. Right now, I'm gonna do maybe about 1/2 gram sprinkled over all of this soil here, just as a light layer. So once that's in, we can go ahead and use the rest of our mix, fill it nicely on top of there until you're about 3/4 of the way up. You don't want to go all the way up on this. Ideally, you want this pot to be 3/4 filled, depending on the type and size of plants. We're going to be growing small pepper plants that will grow into medium-sized pepper plants, so about 3/4 is good. And the way you want to compact these down is you want to start from the outside, compact that soil in, do one quick pass around the outside, shake it down, pack the center, and then just pack it evenly across all. You don't want to pack it down too tight. You should still be able to easily just push your finger on through because we're still got to make that hole to transplant our plants into these. And we don't want to compact it down too much because as it waters and the roots grows, the roots are just going to generally compact the soil also on their own. So now that this pot is filled, let's go ahead and get these pots into our system and we'll see how it looks with all the pots set up in there. So now we have our autopot system all set up. We have media in our pots. We got pots in trays. We got auto valves in the trays as well. We had these covers off during our initial first fill-in because we wanted to make sure that the water level is the same on all of the trays. This is an even surface. That lets us know that all the auto valves are sitting at the same height as well, and all of the pots are going to water themselves at the same rate. It's also nice that these little covers exist for the auto valves because you can kind of peek down anytime you want to and make sure that your plants are either on a dry cycle or a wet cycle, or if there's anything wrong with your auto valve, if it's clogged, you can shake it clean or something like that. So there is a pre-filter on these reservoirs, so you don't have to worry about particulates coming in usually, but we're just running RO water in this, so we actually don't have to worry about that at all. All of our aqua valves are gonna run for a long time with really no maintenance because it's gonna be just water. So we're gonna go ahead and pop all of these covers back on. When you pop these covers on, make sure that the tab is away from the pot. And if you have a lot of resistance putting this on, that might mean your pots are a little too full and bulged out. So they should just go ahead and pop into the grooves and snap in. If you gotta really shove them in on one side, then you may wanna repot or you may wanna mix your soil again. So while we've been setting up this autopot system, you may have noticed this right here, this little white sensor. So this is part of a Niwa control system that we're gonna use to control all of the electronic equipment in this tent because we don't have to worry about the irrigation because this is on an autopot system. Having the Niwa system allow us to control things either remotely or set recipes and times for things basically allows this tent to run automatically. So if you had to go out for a long trip or if you're someone that travels for work a lot, you can always basically make sure that your plants get water through the autopot system and that you can monitor, maintain, and control all of your ancillary electronic equipment, whether it's lights, dehues, AC units, or fans, on the fly, or set times for them. Alrighty, so this is the Niwa 4-port controller. As you can see here, we got 4 ports. Now each outlet is gonna be able to do 10 amps, but all of the outlets together will do 15. Up here, we have our USB port for our sensor. It's just a single port on this 4-port unit. Now the sensor does come with a nice long cable, so you can put it in any size tent and just route it to where it needs to sit. So we really like using these here in our test grow because it just makes it a lot easier for us to be able to be out and about, be gone for a weekend, be gone for a couple days to either film or help a client, and we can maintain our eyes on the grow. This can even push notifications to your phone, either directly or through email, so it's really useful that way. And it records all of the sensor data history, so you can look back and see how things were if you weren't checking it or keeping on top of it every day. You have all of that historical data right at your fingertips on your phone. So this is the dashboard for this particular tent here. As you can see, we have our light on and our air circulation fan is on. That sensor right now is picking up temperature data for our temperature and relative humidity. That also calculates out to the VPD, the vapor pressure deficit. That's going to tell you how much your plants are going to be able to transpire. There's also a light meter in here. Now it's not going to give you full resolution of how much power you're giving the plants, but it'll definitely let you know when your light system is on and off. So this is the dashboard. We just set this up for this tent. So if we look at the statistics option, that's going to be this bottom option here. We can see this is our 1-day data. We can go ahead and check at any time, and it gives us all of this information for temperature, dew point, humidity, light, and VPD. And as you can see, when the lights turned on, we had this huge spike coming up. So you can definitely know the difference between your light levels, whether it's just a small light leak like these low levels, or whether or not your lights are actually on. And of course, when the lights are off, you have very little to no reading on your lights. Now that we know that we could track the data in this tent accurately, we're gonna go ahead and create a recipe for this tent now by going ahead and clicking the recipe button right there at the bottom. So when you first download the app and get registered, the Niwa controller is going to actually come with a couple of different recipes for you. If you want to make your own recipe and have your own custom tent running your own way, you can go to My Recipes, and down here there's a plus sign where you can go ahead and add your own recipe. We'll call this one Auto Pepper 2, and then you can have a small description as well. We hit continue, and the first thing we can configure is our light. So for your light cycles, we go ahead and say add cycle. I want this tent to turn on at 8 in the morning, so we'll go ahead and set it to 8 in the morning, and then we can have it turn off at 8 at night. So just a basic 12-hour cycle. Whatever you grow, it may vary. We can also add multiple cycles as well, which is kind of nice. But for now, we're just going to go ahead and stick with that one cycle because we only need one type of light cycle for these simple plants that'll be in here. The next stage we're going to go into is the watering stage. Now we can go ahead and add a cycle as well if we had some sort of pump or irrigation controllers or solenoid valves in here. And you can select which days you will irrigate and then deselect the days that you don't don't want irrigated. So if you don't want Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, then you can deselect those, or you can go ahead and reselect them back on. You could take that cycle out, but you're gonna want a watering cycle if you have some sort of watering equipment. Luckily for us in this tent, since we're using the autopot system, we don't actually need a watering cycle. So we're gonna go ahead and skip that and just go to climate. Now the climate's a little bit different. You're not gonna set things based on whether you want them on or off. You're gonna allow the sensor to do that work for you. So the first thing that you're gonna wanna do is obviously click add cycle, and you have a few different options of types of cycles you can have. You can have a cycle that starts based on your temperature and relative humidity, one based on your relative humidity and VPD, or one based on your temperature and VPD. We're just gonna go simple and do temperature and relative humidity, and we want this to be active actually all the time. So we're gonna start it at midnight and we're gonna end it at 11:59, essentially making it a 24-hour cycle. And then our target temperature in here, we're gonna go ahead and drop it down to 72 degrees. Target humidity, we're gonna drop it down to 53, and it actually calculates the target VPD for you, which is nice. You can do a little research online to find out, is that the right VPD I want for whatever crop I'm growing in my tent? So once that's done, we can go ahead and go to the bottom and click finish and save. And now after we hit save, we can see that the Auto Pepper 2 came up. Go ahead and click on that, see details, and then it'll tell us everything we set for our light, our water, our climate. Now this is part of a first stage. You can have subsequent stages too if you want your tent to run a little bit more complex, and we can go over that in a later episode. This tent currently is running on the Auto Pepper program that we set earlier, and we can go ahead and see the details of that plan right now. As you can see, we have the lights turning on at 5, turning off at 8 p.m. Water, there's obviously nothing there because we're running the nice autopot system that will water for us. And for climate, like I did before, we have that midnight to 11:59, which is basically a 24-hour cycle. Target temp in here, I set this to 61. Target humidity, I set this to 48. I set this kind of low just because I wanted to see what the potential cooling was in here. Obviously, as you can see behind the phone, there's no plants yet. So I want to run this tent, see how this Niwa gathers data using the nice stats function, and then see what the daily temps usually run with these lights running. That way I can get a little bit more information before I put my plants in and plan for things like humidity, plan for things like a little bit more temperature. So this is a great tool if you want to go ahead and check your plants on the fly, if you want to go ahead and control your grow spaces on the go or at any time. This is a great way to gather data so that you can use this information later on in your next grow to not make the same mistakes or to even make your grow better. All right guys, so we got the autopot system set up and we have been letting it sit for a while with the water on. One cool thing you can do with these autopot systems before you plant is double check your planting depth with how the water and the moisture wicks up in your media. On our 4 pots here, we can see that at the bottom of all of the wells that we're gonna plant, we see we have good wicking all the way up. That means that we have a good media and it's at the right depth in these pots. If it was higher than this, as you can see, this top part would probably still be dry. So it's pretty useful to go ahead and double check what your planting depth is gonna be. This actually is gonna help us find out what depth we want to put our fertilizers in, if we're going to do a little bit of top dressing or if we're gonna do a little bit of side dressing in the pot itself, like off to the side. We know what depths to kind of put our fertilizers to make sure that they do get melted by the root zone. So now that we have confirmed all of the depths, we have confirmed that all the auto valves are working, we're gonna go and throw some plants in here now. All right, we got these pepper plants from our local hardware store, nothing too crazy. This is nice, we have some nice white roots. We just break up that bottom soil a little bit. Go ahead and nestle our plant down into that well we've created and then pack it in from the sides down to the top. All right, so we've just transplanted all of our peppers into our auto pots and I'm just giving them a quick top water with a nice little mister here. This initial watering is just to kind of seat the plant in the media. This isn't really to necessarily water the plant because the water is going to be taken up through the roots naturally with the auto pot system. I just like doing this because it helps seat the plant better in the pot and it makes sure that I know that there's no air bubbles lurking underneath or on the sides of the pot during growth. So after that, you should really see no increase in level on your auto valve access. You can see the water level of your trays right there. So we didn't overflow, we're good. But all of the plants did get watered in. All right guys, so that is our autopot system set up with peppers. So we have our Niwa system set up, we have our autopot irrigation. What we're gonna do is monitor the stats, make sure that all of the parameters for environment stay within where we want them to be. As always, everything that we use today is in the links in the description below. If you have any ideas of how we can improve this tent or what you would have done differently, please leave a comment down below as well. These peppers are gonna grow pretty fast with the amount of light and just the constant watering that they're gonna have. So stay tuned, we're gonna have updates and we'll see you on the next one.